Thank you, Kirk. Listening to Brian and talking about daisy chains, I got nervous. I thought I was here to talk about something different, but no, seriously, I pay attention to Brian, as most of us do, and I appreciate following him. And Kirk, thank you for those warm remarks. Being in a room with Kirk and Rajiv and looking around this room made me think of two important pop culture references of the 1970s and 1980s. The first was a quote from a quintessential entrepreneur, Tony Montana, or as many people knew him, Scarface. The very famous quote, actually spoken by Tony's wife, Elvira, played by the memorable Michelle Pfeiffer, is, "Don't get high on your own supply." The second quote I wanted to mention was spoken by a very well-known scientist in the 1980s, Dr. Emmett Brown, from the movie trilogy that has been in the news this past week, Back to the Future. Coincidentally, the future envisioned by that movie happened October 21st, 2015, next Wednesday. In that trilogy, like the most famous quote explained by Doc Brown about the future was, "Roads, where we're going, we don't need roads." So before I take you down memory lane, let me clue you in on where it fits in today. Let's start with the first quote, "Don't get high on your own supply." If the technology players want to succeed as marketing continues to evolve, my advice is this: stop thinking that the answer is technology and that the mission is for brands to adopt anything and everything that is rooted in tech. I implore you to listen to Michelle. Don't get high on your own supply. Technology is, of course, extremely important and absolutely necessary in today's environment, but both its uses as well as its implications must be very carefully considered. With the advent of all this new technology, there comes both good news and bad news. In that I only have a few minutes this morning, let's get right into it and start with the good news. The first bit of positive feedback, which has been said before but is frankly true, premium content is king. If you were at any of MediaLink's Advertising Week programming, you know this can be a hotly contested statement, but the core of the argument presents the reality that consumers are demanding more high-quality content than ever before, and they want it at warp speed. Frankly, at its core, it is really about the medium that most appropriately suits the marketer's message, or more directly speaking, the medium that spurs the greatest consumer response. Consumers have an insatiable appetite for premium content these days, which creates quite the advertising opportunity. As Brian alluded to, with Facebook and YouTube representing 80% of all online video views, a staggering 8 billion per day, the industry is intimately aware that the where of premium real estate is proliferating. Half of the video views on Facebook and YouTube come from mobile devices, as we know, and that number is growing fast. The average American adult now spends nearly 6 hours per day consuming media on their phones, computers, and tablet devices. This behavioral shift has caused a spending spree on YouTube and other video platforms. So although it's good news that that premium content is king, given the dramatic shifts in consumer consumption patterns and platforms, the king needs to keep an eye on his crown. A videology study last June determined how shifts in media consumption have changed the traditional focus on the new TV season airing in September. According to that study, 55% of consumers watch the majority of their TV shows online, and 46% don't know that September traditionally marks the new TV season. For those of you who don't know, the reason September was the start of a new season really had to do with advertising, nothing else, and it had to do with auto manufacturers, just for a little bit of a walk down memory lane. Autos were always introduced in September, the new model year, and advertisers would be where the money came from. Certain things haven't changed, and that's why we have a fall season TV launch as opposed to January. I mean, what reason would you have otherwise expected for it to happen in the fall? The second bit of good news I have to share, technology has never before enabled buying efficiencies like it does today. Said differently, if you're betting on marketing's reliance on technology, it's a good bet. Technology now influences every aspect of the global media value chain, particularly automated media buying against audience demos, as you know. These solutions are driving massive innovations across industries and unlocking efficiency and effectiveness, two things I have historically considered to be scarce in our business. On the opposite end of that argument, though, is this. Technology-enabled platforms and solutions have also spawned an enormous supply. and a surplus, specifically as it relates to digital inventory. Therein lies the bad news, or as I like to call it, the opportunity. Employing technology to create a digital forward market is simply not enough. Kirk talked about the digital NewFronts. That system, which is now about 7 years old, I think, maybe 6. No, actually, the original NewFront was launched 7 years ago. It was not launched as a marketplace. It was launched as a place to look at content on a digital platform. It became a marketplace only 3 years ago, I think. The reason for this is fairly simple. Economics. An upfront or a forward market requires scarcity to properly function. While there is a current imbalance of supply and demand, sophisticated buying strategies, and ad blocking software, amongst other approaches and tools, they may level set the playing field. Buyers have access to almost limitless real estate when considering a pool that includes digital, premium programmatic buyers, however, aren't looking for random, low-quality inventory online. They're leveraging sophisticated software to identify precise combinations of audience, context, and price to best engage consumers, designed to elevate their brand and push competition away from those opportunities. These activities will drive demand towards a concentrated amount of premium inventory. The other player addressing the infinite supply syndrome is the ad blocking software, another white-hot topic that dominated much of the conversations during Advertising Week this past month. Although the use of ad blocking software is on the rise and causing advertisers to scramble to find a solution to reach guarded audiences, specifically millennials, there is a fairly similar silver lining. Ad blockers will ultimately be the driver that eradicates long-tail publishers and advertisers alike, driving up demand and revenue for fewer, better, high-quality ads. This will result, in my opinion, in a cleaner digital experience and will trigger new directions for excellence for consumers and marketers alike. It's an opportunity to truly enable native. Elevating ad blocking software in both its awareness and incidence creates opportunities for tech companies that have a stake in the assurance of the high-quality content and fraud prevention to broaden their product offering through build or buy, which will ultimately lead to a consolidation across the advertising technology landscape. And although we will inevitably endure short-term pain, we will certainly incur long-term gain. Another potential piece of bad news, not as widely discussed as market oversaturation, is the lack of consistency that exists in our ever-changing industry. Today, there are inconsistencies as it relates to common currency and vocabulary being used to buy and socialize these new mediums and formats. How can two distinctly different infrastructures, that of digital and TV, converge into one marketplace design when currency and vocabularies are not consistent? Today, that dichotomy is clear as online advertising continues to proliferate. TV is, as you know, bought in 30-second units, while digital is transacted in impressions. As the industry continues to shift from auction-based model toward a futures market and TV becomes more addressable, the transaction currency will continue to morph. As we know, the rise of procurement in every marketer's organization continues to change the way marketers look at the currency and the measurement. Going back to Doc Brown, what he said about the future in which we currently reside, we won't need roads. While he was, of course, speaking of the lack of utility of an old-fashioned paved road when you have a flying automobile, the same idea is true for digital advertisements that have no time expiration given their nonlinear nature. In other words, in a world where media was historically purchased in one form and now can also be purchased in another, how do you level set these forms to more easily compare? Furthermore, it's the need for the consistent vocabulary. As I said, premium content is king, but frankly, with so much content out there, what the hell does premium really mean? What it means to me personally is likely different than what it means to you, which is different than what it means to my grandchildren. I was doing a little conversation before I came down here upstairs for a video feed, and the question was asked about premium programming, and I said, I guess the consumer's view of premium programming would be one. I think a marketer's view of premium programming would be another, because to me, if I'm a marketer, premium program is where I can reach the consumer I need. That to me is premium programming. So I think you need to look at it through both of those lenses. Facebook's first dedicated ad buying system for video, called TRP buying, certainly many in this room know the acronym of a TRP. The reference is long held to traditional media metric called targeted rating points that television-focused marketers will immediately understand. Efforts like these to design the service to service the needs of the advertiser community and to reduce the friction as it relates to communication should be congratulated. Without them, there is no standardized set of criteria qualifying premium content, which I believe will ultimately be an inhibiting factor when considering an upfront buy. The industry needs to give publishers incentive to catalog and define inventory more clearly than ever before, which is not only good for a futures market, but for an automated marketing stratosphere overall. More often than not, print, radio, and TV are becoming completely irrelevant descriptors of the media they are trying to represent. The industry must stop referring to TV. Rather, the content should be referred to as video, a medium that can be consumed across a number of channels, or more simply put, a talkie you can consume anywhere. Or consider radio. The way I consume radio today on my phone with a video embed is very different than the way I consumed radio in 1957 when I was driving with my dad in his Ford Thunderbird. Although just between us, there's a similar amount of Frank Sinatra music still being played, so I have to fess up to that. To truly create a system that works with today's technology-driven media landscape, we must become more comfortable with the new tools that have been created to drive it. Likely the most important of these tools is data. Not only is the targeting of media important, but leveraging data for measurement is an imperative. The role that audience data will have on shifting perceptions of premium, reach, and delivery will unlock more value for both sides and will drive prices up, not down, ultimately, as a result of the data-based audience buying. The Comscore Rentrack deal recently announced typifies how important the measurement of this data is in today's landscape. Marketers aren't requesting properly measured data, they're demanding it across linear and digital mediums, ranging from smartphones to gaming consoles and beyond. As the system has changed, it ultimately affects the process that enables this market. Embracing and building contemporary planning and buying models is a work in progress, but something I believe will inevitably evolve as well. It is my belief that the time has come to invert the media planning process by flipping the planning and the creative. I think we will see a new model in our agency ecosystem as we look out 18 to 24 months. If you look at what happened in the spring of this year in Atlanta, I think it points to an interesting change in our business. I talk about the Coca-Cola media review that took place earlier this year. And one of the nuances of that review that I think needs to be focused on is, in that circumstance, you had traditional media agencies pitching for the account for media planning and buying. But surprisingly, you had Ogilvy and Mather pitching for the media planning on that piece of business. And I think it would be hard to find a circumstance other than a few examples, maybe Wyden and Kennedy and Crispin Porter and Deutsch, of agencies that are going to market in a full service way. But to have Ogilvy and Mather pitching a media planning account for the first time in quite some time against standard media agencies, I think portends a new bundle in the future. And I think, as I said kind of tongue-in-cheek to Martin Sorrell during Advertising Week, does this mean Don Draper is back in the media buying business? Because it certainly would seem to be the case. So I think that's something that we need to look at as we look at bringing planning back into the creative process in a rapid fashion. The typical process today develops the creative first and then is handed to the media team, as you know, who's directed to buy space or time and run that creative. We did see it on Mad Men, and we continue to see it today, as often today as back then. The creative campaign is still primarily designed for TV, even though the mediums that eventually deliver the most viewership may be alternative platforms. Sounds absurd, but it's true. With the incredibly wide array of media choices available, brands and agencies alike should identify where the target consumes media and then, and only then, turn it over to the creative team to develop content for those specific media platforms. That may be a 7-second Vine, an 82-second native, a 30-second TV spot, a 10-second digital out of home, or a new format that may pop up tomorrow. But at least in this new order, the creative will be built specifically for the appropriate medium. This paradigm shift would assure unbiased development of communication elements and develop ideas that are media agnostic at ideation. To conclude, we are at a precipice of an entirely new media landscape forged by the ubiquity of modern technology. To achieve that end goal, where the market functions to be the benefit of all, is still years away. We must overcome obstacles such as lack of consistency and backwards processes of yesteryear in order to accomplish the goals of tomorrow. We must be intelligent enough to understand when and how to use the technology to our advantage and not let it overcomplicate our objectives. Simply put, we want consumers to buy stuff. We're not performing brain surgery. Guys, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity.